Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to live suspended over a waterfall, where the sound of rushing water becomes the soundtrack to your everyday life, and the line between inside and outside dissolves into something almost magical? Welcome back to UrbArchitect, where today we're diving deep into one of the most iconic and audacious residential designs in American architectural history, Fallingwater, also known as the Kaufmann residence, a masterpiece that Frank Lloyd Wright created in 1935 in the rugged forests of southwestern Pennsylvania. This isn't just a house, folks, it's a bold architectural statement that challenged everything people thought they knew about how buildings should relate to nature. And honestly, it's the kind of project that makes you question why we ever thought putting a house next to a beautiful natural feature was better than putting it literally on top of it. Fallingwater sits in Mill Run, Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half southeast of Pittsburgh, perched dramatically over Bear Run, a mountain stream that cascades down a series of rocky ledges in what was once the private weekend retreat of the Kaufmann family. Edgar Kaufmann was a successful Pittsburgh department store owner, and his son, Edgar Kaufmann Jr., had studied briefly with Wright at his Taliesin Fellowship in Wisconsin, which is how this legendary commission came about. The story goes that the Kaufmanns originally expected Wright to design a home with a view of the waterfall from across the stream, but Wright had other ideas, much bolder ideas, and when he unveiled his design, the house wasn't positioned to look at the falls, it was positioned to become one with them, to hover directly above the cascading water in a gesture so daring that it left the Kaufmanns initially speechless and probably a little terrified. But let's back up a bit and talk about the context in which this remarkable building emerged, because Fallingwater didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was the product of a specific moment in architectural history and the culmination of ideas Wright had been developing for decades. By the mid-1930s, the world was still recovering from the Great Depression, and architecture in America was at a crossroads. European modernism, with its international style championed by architects like Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, and Walter Gropius, was gaining traction with its emphasis on pure geometric forms, white walls, flat roofs, and a kind of machine-age aesthetic that celebrated industry and mass production. Meanwhile, Frank Lloyd Wright, who was already in his late 60s and whose career had seen some ups and downs, was working on his own distinctly American version of modernism, something he called organic architecture. Wright had always believed that buildings should grow naturally from their sites, that architecture should be in harmony with humanity and its environment, and that the relationship between a building and the landscape it inhabited was sacred. This philosophy was deeply rooted in his prairie-style houses from the early 1900s, but by the 1930s, Wright was ready to push these ideas even further, and Fallingwater became the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that his organic principles could create something utterly revolutionary. The timing was also significant because this was the era when Americans were becoming increasingly interested in nature and conservation, when national parks were being established and people were seeking escape from the industrial cities into the wilderness. So a house that dissolved the boundaries between interior living spaces and the natural world had a special resonance. Now let's talk about the design itself, because this is where things get really fascinating. When you first approach Fallingwater through the forest, you catch glimpses of horizontal plains of concrete and stone that seem to float among the trees, and then suddenly you're at the bridge entrance and the full drama of the composition reveals itself. Massive cantilevered terraces projecting boldly over the waterfall, their strong horizontal lines contrasting with the vertical stone chimney core that anchors the entire structure to the hillside. Wright's concept was to make the house an extension of the natural rock ledges of the stream, so he used locally quarried sandstone for the vertical elements, laying the stones in the same horizontal stratification you see in the natural rock formations, while the reinforced concrete terraces echo the flat plains of the ledges over which the water flows. The genius here is that Wright didn't just place a modern house in a natural setting, he fundamentally integrated the two, creating an architecture that is inseparable from its site. The main floor is organized around a central stone fireplace and chimney, which is built around an actual boulder that was part of the original stream bed. And yes, you read that right, there's a massive rock that just emerges from the floor of the living room because Wright decided it should stay exactly where nature put it. From this central core, the spaces flow outward onto the terraces, with walls of glass and corner windows that open the interior to the surrounding forest and the sounds of the waterfall below. Wright was obsessed with breaking down the traditional box of rooms, and at Fallingwater you can see this philosophy in action. Spaces flow into one another without rigid boundaries. Ceiling heights vary to create intimacy or drama, and everywhere you look there are these carefully orchestrated views that frame nature like living paintings. The materials palette is remarkably restrained, just concrete, stone, glass, and steel painted in Wright's signature Cherokee red. But the way these materials are composed creates an incredible richness and complexity. The concrete terraces are finished smooth on their undersides, emphasizing their planar quality and their defiance of gravity, while the stone walls are rough and irregular, grounding the house in the geological reality of the place. One of the most magical aspects of the design is how Wright plays with levels and movement through space. The main entrance is actually on the middle level, accessed by a bridge from the hillside, and from there you can either move up to the private bedroom levels or down to the main living area with its famous cantilevered terrace that extends over the falls. There's even a stairway that descends directly from the living room down to the stream itself, so you can literally walk from your living room to the water in a matter of seconds, which is the kind of experiential connection to nature that most houses can only dream about. Wright also designed almost all of the furniture and built-in elements specifically for the house, from the dining table to the chairs to the light fixtures, ensuring that every detail contributed to his unified vision. Now let's get a bit technical, because the structural engineering of Fallingwater is a story in itself, one that involves both brilliant innovation and some serious problems that had to be addressed decades later. Those dramatic concrete cantilevers that project up to 15 feet beyond their support are held up by reinforced concrete beams, and the structural system is actually relatively straightforward in concept. Steel reinforcing bars embedded in the concrete carry the tensile forces while the concrete itself carries the compression. However, and this is a big however, Wright was somewhat optimistic, shall we say, about how much his cantilevers could achieve with the reinforcement he specified. The contractor, Edgar Kaufmann's own construction team, was nervous about the design and actually added extra reinforcement without telling Wright, which probably saved the structure from early failure. Even so, within a few years of completion, the terraces began to sag visibly, and by the late 1990s, a major structural intervention was necessary to stabilize them. Engineers installed a system of post-tension cables to arrest the deflection and prevent further sagging, which was a delicate operation that had to be done without compromising the building's appearance or integrity. This isn't a criticism of Wright so much as a reminder that pushing the boundaries of what's structurally possible sometimes means discovering those boundaries the hard way. And honestly, the fact that these cantilevers exist at all, even with their structural challenges, is a testament to the audacity of Wright's vision. The building's relationship with light is another key element of its success. Wright understood that natural light could be used to shape space and create atmosphere, and at Fallingwater he employs light in multiple ways. The large expanses of glass on the main facades flood the interior with daylight and visually connect the rooms to the forest, while the deeper spaces around the central fireplace are more subdued and cave-like, creating a sense of shelter. The terraces themselves provide horizontal planes that modulate the light entering the building, creating bands of shadow and brightness that change throughout the day and with the seasons. Wright also incorporated clear-story windows and corner windows that dematerialize the walls, making the structure feel lighter and more transparent than its substantial mass would suggest. In terms of environmental considerations, Fallingwater is interesting because while it wasn't designed with the kind of technical sustainability metrics we use today, it embodies a deeper environmental ethic. The house works with the site's natural systems rather than against them. The stream continues to flow beneath the house unimpeded, the native forest surrounds and shades the structure, and the massive thermal mass of the stone walls and concrete floors helps moderate interior temperatures. There's no mechanical air conditioning, just natural ventilation and the cooling effect of the water below, which keeps the house comfortable even in summer. Of course, the constant humidity from the waterfall has created maintenance challenges over the years, including issues with mold and deterioration of materials, proving that even the most poetic architectural gestures come with practical consequences. Wright also thought carefully about circulation and how people would experience the house sequentially. The approach through the forest, the crossing of the bridge, the entry at mid-level, the descent to the main living area, the movement out onto the terraces, the stairway down to the stream, every moment is choreographed to create a narrative of discovery and connection with the landscape. This is architecture as experiential journey, not just a static object, and it's one of the reasons why Fallingwater feels so powerful when you visit it in person. though I should mention that visiting can be a bit of a production since it's now a museum operated by the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy and you need time tickets, but trust me, it's absolutely worth the planning. The impact of Fallingwater on the architectural world was immediate and profound. When the house was published in architectural journals in 1938, just 2 years after its completion, it created a sensation. Here was proof that modern architecture didn't have to be cold, austere, or disconnected from nature, that you could embrace new technologies and materials while still creating spaces that felt warm, human, and spiritually connected to the landscape. Fallingwater appeared on the cover of Time magazine in 1938 with Wright's face prominently featured, cementing both the buildings and the architect's places in the public imagination and helping to revive Wright's career after a relatively quiet period. The house won numerous awards and has been called the greatest work of American architecture by the American Institute of Architects, and it's consistently ranked among the most important buildings of the 20th century in surveys of architects and critics. Beyond its immediate reception, Fallingwater's influence on subsequent architecture has been enormous. It demonstrated that cantilevers could be used not just as structural tricks but as powerful formal and spatial devices. It showed how modern materials could be combined with natural ones to create rich, layered compositions, and it proved that the modernist project didn't have to abandon regional identity or connection to place. You can see its influence in countless later works that attempt to integrate buildings with dramatic natural sites, from Richard Neutra's houses in California to contemporary projects around the world that seek to blur the boundaries between inside and outside. The house also became a powerful symbol in American culture more broadly, appearing in films, advertisements, and popular media as a shorthand for architectural sophistication and the American dream of living in harmony with nature. Of course, no building is without its critics, and Fallingwater has had its share of detractors over the years. Some have argued that the house is actually quite intrusive on the natural site, that all that concrete and those bold geometries are the opposite of natural, and that Wright's ego-driven design imposed his vision on a landscape that might have been better left alone. Others have pointed out the practical problems, the aforementioned structural issues, the humidity and maintenance challenges, the fact that the house is actually rather dark inside due to the deep overhangs and surrounding trees, and the reality that some of the spaces are quite small and compressed, particularly in the bedroom levels. Edgar Kaufmann himself had a somewhat complicated relationship with the house, loving it as an architectural achievement but finding it challenging to live in, with its maintenance demands and quirks. But here's the thing about masterpieces. They don't have to be perfect to be important, and Fallingwater's flaws don't diminish its significance or the power of its central idea. Today, Fallingwater stands as one of the most visited houses in America, with over 150,000 people making the pilgrimage to Mill Run each year to experience Wright's masterpiece firsthand. The Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, which was given the property by Edgar Kaufmann Jr. in 1963, has done an incredible job of preserving and maintaining the house, undertaking careful conservation work to address the structural and material issues while keeping the building as close as possible to Wright's original vision. Walking through Fallingwater now, more than 85 years after its completion, you can still feel the radical nature of what Wright achieved here. The house still surprises, still challenges our assumptions about the relationship between architecture and nature, and still demonstrates that great design is about more than just solving practical problems. It's about creating experiences that elevate the human spirit and make us see the world differently. In many ways, Fallingwater represents the best of what architecture can be. Technically ambitious, aesthetically bold, conceptually clear, and emotionally powerful. It reminds us that buildings don't have to dominate their sites or stand apart from nature. They can instead become part of the landscape, growing from it and enhancing it. Wright's organic architecture philosophy, which he spent his entire career developing and refining, found perhaps its most perfect expression in this house suspended over a Pennsylvania waterfall, where stone, concrete, water, and forest come together in a composition that still feels fresh and relevant nearly a century later. As architects and architecture enthusiasts, we can learn so much from Fallingwater. The importance of understanding and respecting site conditions, the power of strong conceptual ideas, the value of integrating multiple scales from furniture to landscape, the potential of materials to carry meaning and create atmosphere, and yes, even the lessons about pushing structural limits and the need for careful detailing and maintenance. So the next time you're working on a project, whether it's a house or any other building type, ask yourself, Am I working with the site or against it? Am I creating experiences or just arranging rooms? Am I being bold enough in my vision while still being responsible about the details? Fallingwater sets a high bar, maybe an impossibly high bar. But that's exactly why it remains so inspiring, and why it continues to capture imaginations around the world. If you found this deep dive into